time for us to turn our attention to rugby. I'm delighted to say Ronan O'Gara is with us. Ronan, good morning to you. How are you?
Ciaran, how are you doing?
Very good. We'll talk about the Six Nations and the squad and who should play and who shouldn't. But before we get to that, a couple of players who aren't in the squad at the moment, and they're the 10s at Munster. We've gone from being very concerned about the future of the 10 at Munster to being like, ooh, all of a sudden there's massive strength in depth and real competition. So is Ben Healy just top of the tree slightly at the moment, or what's the pecking order from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. Everything, I suppose, the buzzword at the minute is game time, isn't it? And you can see, especially with young 10s, how they are improving when they get to play in big games. And I suppose the only big games have been cast away. Wasps at home, probably Ulster game as well. But in terms of, I suppose, how it's viewed with Heineken Rugby in Munster Champions Cup, Munster, it's always a step up. Ben Healy was really, really good at the weekend, I thought, and the fact that I think we were, it's been probably well said at this stage, aware of his kicking strengths, but he looked like an all-round 10, really, really comfortable and really exciting at the weekend, and that I probably hadn't seen that before in his game, and it was really promising to see that. So it was probably strange, I think, from the outside, and that's always interesting when you're in the camp in sport, that you would have thought after the Cast game that Jack Crowley would have retained the position, considering how well, I suppose, he game managed and mental resilience in that game. But it was strange to probably see Healy being drafted in, because it is probably another position where I think you'll see huge progress too when guys get 3 or 4 games in a row. But with the strength of competition in Munster, that doesn't seem to be an option. So I suppose for Ben Healy to come in and play like that, it must speak volumes for the way he's training.
One thing that we've seen that Leinster have been able to do is they've been able to keep almost everybody happy over the last while. Now, there's obviously a breaking point at some point, and maybe there isn't. Maybe the two Byrne brothers can stay there together if Sexton finishes up in the next 18 months. But is there a template there for making sure that Crowley and Healy and Joey Carberry all get game time and all play for Ireland and all feel like their career is progressing, or is there just one out half too many there at the moment?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I think how you can keep, why it works in Leinster is the fact that i.e. with the Crusaders, their silverware, that's where you get buy-in from everyone, because if you lose, I suppose, the soccer analogy, it's the fact that when players, going back over the ages, probably when they stayed with Barcelona and they were happy to play a handful of games, they knew at the end of the season that they'd get a medal. That was the same with the Crusaders, where you get buy-in from the squad players, the guys who play 4 games in the season. But when they play those 4 games, they've been kind of positive growth mindset for the season, and they feel that they are really valued, and they prefer to kind of have their medal at the end of the season with the Crusaders than be a starter with the Highlanders or with the Chiefs, for example. But that can't happen in every club, because, you know what I mean, only one club wins silverware, and in Leinster's case, it's more likely there than Munster over the current I suppose data for the last 10 years. So with Munster's point of view, with 3 10s, poor old Joey Carberry has been injured a lot, but when he has had a chance, I suppose, to present himself on the training paddock on a Monday morning, he has done a lot of good things in a green jersey and in a red jersey, and then the other 2 now are picking up the scraps from when Joey isn't there, but they're making a go of it of their own now. But between the 2 of them, it seems that probably 2 of them is probably sufficient, but then you obviously have the hangover of Joey Carberry lurking.
Ben Healy, in the aftermath of the game the other day, Ronan, was saying how Stephen Larkham has been such a great help for him, has been such a great guiding force for him at Munster over the last little while. It feels that Stephen Larkham's time at Munster has been judged on the style of play at Munster, but perhaps should we be paying a little bit more attention to him as a number 10 whisperer almost?
Yeah, I think that's always in the background in every club, really. I suppose, including coaches that are ex-players when they go into a club. they have obviously innate detail on one position especially, and in Stephen Larkham's case and in my case it would be an out half scenario, but sometimes that can work negatively as well, because the shadow may be too big and it may be too difficult, because you're comparing the current crop to someone like Stephen Larkham. And Stephen Larkham was, for people who was an exceptional rugby player. You made it look very, very easy. And for coaches sometimes to think that, well, why do you find that difficult? Sometimes you have to step back a bit and never assume and go, well, this is his understanding of this may not be where it needed to be. So that whole I suppose relationship on, it's easy in the fact that, yeah, I played in that position, but when you're getting down to improvements in the game, it becomes a little bit more detailed and deeper than you perhaps appreciate. But for Ben Healy, for Jack Crowley, for Joey Carberry, to have someone like Stephen Larkham there's it would be a huge, I suppose, missed opportunity if their 3 games didn't grow. And maybe you may only see the growth of that when Stephen has gone 12 or 18 months, because it actually takes a little bit of time for ideas to settle into and to be understood in younger kids. And I think they're lucky to have that opportunity.
And they are so young in terms of out half and the age profile of when we expect out halves to reach, particularly in Ireland, their full evolution. I did want to ask just generally if there was signs of the game plan finally coming to fruition. Niamh Briggs makes the point on the Red 78 podcast about intention for her as a coach, now that she's coaching, is more important than execution. Are we trying these things? Is there a pattern beginning to evolve? She said that she could see over the last few games they were trying stuff, it wasn't coming off. It started to come off at the weekend. Perhaps the truth about Munster is closer to the weekend than it has been the previous few weeks, when you take into account the fact that they had all of the COVID issues where half the squad was marooned in South Africa for a period of time when the big games were supposed to happen and we were supposed to see this. They didn't have the opportunity to put that out. So I'm wondering, is the truth about Munster, it was never as bad as people said? It wasn't, maybe not quite as amazing as it was at the weekend, but that it's closer to last weekend than the depths of, say, the Connacht game in particular?
I think it changes very quickly on, and I think you nearly have to go through particular games to get, I suppose, a real detailed opinion on that. And the fact that some games, when you watch, you kind of have to, I suppose, for me, there would be question marks over certain decisions in terms of why slow it down to go to a box kick as opposed to, I think what suits Munster, and which was very evident at the weekend watching the game, was the crowd are just only dying to get in behind the team. Like the energy the crowd gave the team, I think, convinced them to play with tempo, even though they'll say that they were playing in front of them. But the flip side is that the team that played in Wasps away was a team that hadn't trained very much together. It was a 2 weeks build up, and they played probably without expectation and without fear, and it made it for a quite deadly, I suppose, combo and potency to their game. So the thing about the tactics and the game plan, players too have to own that, and the fact that so much of it is very, very dependent on winning collisions. And when you're winning collisions, then you can get to it easily. If you're not winning collisions and the ball is static, you kind of revert to type, and revert to type is chasing box kicks and winning the air, and that serves them well to a point. But I think you can see now that they have so many good players that they can play both games.
Can we talk a little bit about the Ireland squad then? And there wasn't a huge amount of turnover and a huge amount of surprises in the 37-man squad that was selected, that's going to go to Portugal ahead of the tournament, and so therefore you would assume is going to be the backbone of the actual competition itself. There are a few names who we haven't seen that much of, who are playing really, really well at the moment. and in particular it's three Ulster backs really, and maybe Coombs as well, who are on the fringes of the match squad and who we'd all love to see play. How does Andy Farrell manage the expectation of the IRFU to win the tournament, his own desire to create a squad that's ready for the World Cup, and then rewarding the form of those players who've played potentially the most rugby because of COVID, but actually are playing brilliantly as well? What are those selection meetings like, and how does he decide?
Yeah, it's very competitive now. You might think it's easy to pick 37, but another name jumping straight out of me is Ciaran Frawley, who didn't make the squad, if I'm correct, this week this time. And for me, he's probably the nearest thing to an Aaron Mauger that we have on this side of the hemisphere. He looks so adept at either playing 10 or 12, that second receiver role. He looks so interesting as a player that he has, I think, the physical attributes to play a direct game, but then his feet are excellent, his passing game is excellent. I think his recognition of space is very, very good. And he seems to be a threat every time he plays. So for him not to be in whatever the best 17 backs is probably incredibly disappointing for him. And as you mentioned, there was three other, I think, the three Ulster backs have made it into the squad.
Yeah, Balakoon and Lowry and Hume.
Yeah, Lowry is just, I think you look at the ease at which he glided past Morgan Parra. There aren't many people who do that over the last 12 years, and he did it with ridiculous ease at the weekend in Ravenhill. So he looks like his acceleration is very, very interesting. But 15 is a very, very competitive position, in the fact that Keenan just seems to be churning out those 8 out of 10s every week, and just that's what teammates like, in the fact that if there is a one-on-one, and there rarely is a one-on-one for Leinster, you look at him getting back, I think, off the interception from Bath's first try at the weekend. Obviously his desire, but also his speed and his capacity to get back and put in a try-saving tackle. They did score it, but if there wasn't a support runner, they wouldn't have scored. So Keenan did the business there, but he's doing it on both sides of the ball. And that's what you expect, obviously, for a team that's riding high after a very impressive November series. So, yeah, competition for places. And that's what you look for with coaches, that people come into camp with a pep in their step, and you know straight away that the training is going to be competitive, because people are looking, well, how do I get into this 10 here, i.e. the best 10. You're going to be picking 10 backs for each game and 13 forwards, and that will make for interesting trainings for Ireland over the next 10 days.
The automatic reaction to what you're saying there is that how do we get more Ciaran Frawleys into the system, as in I don't know whether or not Lowry can make it as a 10 potentially over the next little while, and the same goes for number 10 or for the other 10s potentially moving back into midfield or into full back. But how special is it what Ciaran Frawley is doing, or to be able to have the specific skill set to be able to play those couple of positions? Because I think we kind of talk about it in a very simplistic manner.
Yeah, exactly. You look at obviously the potential combinations they have at Leinster in the midfield, and it's scary really how many options they have. But I suppose what jumps out straight away is the fact that you're probably advancing their development if they're playing in a Premiership or in the top 14, or in a URC that's competitive, but it's not competitive, so they're not developing probably, I think, as fast or as necessarily as quick as they should be, and that's not to knock the model at home. I'm just saying what's available, I suppose, overseas, in the fact that when you have a kind of a genuine kind of top 14, or you have a genuine Premiership where there's massive history and pride involved in winning that competition, that doesn't exist. For the Irish, Welsh and Scottish provinces, it's all about Europe, but those Europe, it's obviously reduced down to 4 games, and then it goes to obviously the back-to-back in the last 16 quarters semi. That's not enough games for anybody, and I think what happened before with a lot of the provinces is carrying big squads. You don't really need to be carrying big squads anymore, because of the games are cut, and when it goes to Six Nations time, you're playing against teams that are missing other Six Nations members. So the mismatches that are happening, that had been happening for the previous years, were, I think Leinster, no matter what gear they were winning by 40 or 50 points. I think players develop better when they're playing, I suppose, tighter games with less. And that's when you can really balance your squad, and the fact that you can have turnover. When you start 15, then you might have 6 changes next week, you might have 3 the following week, you might have 4 the following week, you might have 7 the following week, you might have 1 the next week. But that's how, I suppose, you get, I think, the best out of your squad. It's hard in Ireland, the fact that they have the Champions Cup, but after that, I don't think the URC is the model at the minute.
Would it be the model if we were all able to go to South Africa and go on those South African tours and the best South African teams are coming, or is your instinct that this...
Yeah, it could be, Ger, but we've had COVID for 24 months, and the planning, I suppose, and the fact that was always going to be, things weren't going to get better in that regard. So it's interesting. Are we going to go to a same season model? There's so many questions that are left to be answered at this stage.
Yeah, and in the meantime, as you say, the provinces are carrying these massive squads and trying to keep players happy. And like, if you think back to your own career, if you were one of the 3 young out halves at Munster, I can see why you would be fielding calls about maybe spending a couple of years abroad.
But just that's the strength of the provinces and the Irish model. You don't have any interest. I think that's changing probably now with the generation, but from my time it was all about playing for Munster, and you did absolutely everything you could, and there was no other club that matters. This is what I want to do, get to Thomond Park every Saturday. Then you taste what a European day in Thomond Park is, and then you just want more and more and more and more. And if there was 2 fellas in your position or 5 fellas in your position, it didn't matter. You wanted to play, and I think that's why Munster certainly had the identity that it had. And you look at the weekend where you could just see the place is just waiting to take off again. I feel from watching on the outside that the crowd are just trying to get behind this team and give it a big lift, because confidence levels are a little bit low there, but it can come back so quickly with a few performances like they had on Sunday.
That's why the decision around the head coach is so important. We didn't talk to you about Mike Prendergast. During the week he was on a podcast saying he's not sure, he doesn't think, wasn't, and obviously he's not going to say on the podcast, come and get me when he's in the gig at the moment. But you definitely, you talked about him, I think, in December in the Examiner. You still really feel like he should be part of the coaching ticket at whatever level?
Well, he's pure Limerick, he's pure Munster. I think that's hard to beat in the with the timing of that. I think he gets the local game, he gets the importance of the AIL, he gets the importance of players feeling comfortable in themselves, being able to express themselves, I suppose, being authentic, having that capacity to express themselves. He's he's grown up in Limerick. I think he knows how Munster tick. That's very, very important, irrespective of the style you want to play. I think his man management is exceptional. I think his mindset is very, very good. I think looking at the outset, and I don't have any, I suppose, knowledge of what's going on there, he would be a huge addition to Munster. But the reality is he's coaching one of the best teams in Europe in Racing. So he's a competitor. He wants to get better. He wants to win titles. He's on a good run with Racing. They're probably looking good in the European Cup this year. So I suppose it's a huge, huge decision for him. But in terms of, I suppose, rugby thoroughbred, he sure is one of them.
All right, sounds like Munster would benefit massively from that injection of somebody, and there's not many people who have that kind of combination of experience at the very top level and also a connection with the city, which I think is hugely important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's done hard yards. He's gone from, obviously, interestingly, left Munster probably as a player before anyone would even have thought about it. So that obviously shows for me that he's a little bit different, and his way of thinking is a little bit different. And he's gone from Grenoble, Oyonnax, Stade Francais to Racing. He's seen so many, I suppose, different coaches from all over the world. That's what you get in the French game, and I think he's never lost, I suppose, his roots and his rocks and what he stands for. And he's pure Limerick City, but he knows exactly how he wants the game to be played. And I think any players that you come across that have left him have been hugely impressed by him.
All right, last question for me then is about Ballacoon, obviously playing really well at the moment. James Lowe is out. Is it the team? Do we really just start the team that beat the All Blacks at the start of the Six Nations to get a win on the board, and maybe sub in Ballacoon for James Lowe and away you go, or would you like to see more changes?
No, I think we could spend hours on this between the three of us picking a potential team or potentially predicting 5 different teams for the games, because huge thought will go into this, how you go about it. I know from a player the massive criteria objective on round 1 is getting momentum. So there is a little bit more pressure on your first game up at home to Wales, but Ireland have the cattle to do that. There's no doubt about it. Ballacoon, I think, will start. I'm not too sure will he start the Wales game. He could do, but I think he'll definitely start the Italian game. And as you say, the Six Nations is where you see someone of his capacity, whether he's able to make the step up. Everything points that he will be able to. I think it's a little bit more forgiving starting a guy in a Six Nations game, especially be it Italy, Scotland and Wales in a home game, as opposed to Twickenham or France or Stade de France. That's not really setting up your debutants to succeed, but it potentially can. Also, it can be a very brave call. It can be rewarded, because the other option is you start them on the wing in New Zealand away from home. But I think for that to happen, you probably like to see how he goes in a Six Nations home game first, then a Six Nations away game, and then, okay, well, if he's finding a straps on the wing against New Zealand, you know this guy's here to stay.